Her name is Emily Shaw, a schoolteacher living alone on the edge of Cedar Hill, a quiet town nestled in the heart of Wisconsin. Her days are simple: morning walks, a warm cup of tea, and tending to her small flower garden. Emily finds peace in solitude and keeps to herself. But her heart has always been open to the world around her. She lives in a modest cottage, with ivy climbing up the porch rails and wind chimes that sing softly in the breeze. Every morning before sunrise, she walks the same wooded path behind her home, listening to the birds and the wind moving through the trees. Afterward, she brews her tea, opens the curtains wide, and waters the sunflowers lining her fence. Emily doesn't speak much, but her presence carries quiet kindness. Though she lives alone, her soul is full of warmth, and when something or someone needs help, she never turns away. It was a cool spring evening. The sky had turned soft lavender, and the last golden light of day painted the tops of the trees. Emily walked her usual trail near the old railway path, enjoying the scent of fresh grass and the faint hum of crickets. It was her favorite time of day, a moment to breathe, to think, and to just be. The gentle breeze carried a hint of pine and the sweet smell of blooming wildflowers. The gravel crunched quietly beneath her shoes as she moved at a steady pace, hands tucked into the pockets of her cardigan. Overhead, a pair of robins darted through the air, their wings brushing the silence with soft flutters. Emily paused now and then to admire the changing sky, its colors deepening by the minute. In these quiet walks, she found comfort, like the world was speaking in whispers only she could hear. Suddenly, a low whimper broke the calm. It was soft at first, barely noticeable over the rustling leaves and the buzz of distant cicadas, but it carried something raw, something broken. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her ears strained to listen. The sound came again, a little louder this time, trembling and weak. It wasn't the cry of a wild animal hunting or warning. It was different. It sounded like pain. Gently, she stepped off the path, brushing past the low branches of birch and thick stalks of wildflowers. Her feet moved slowly through the tall grass, careful not to make noise. Then, through the dense green, she spotted something dark lying still in the distance. At first, it looked like a shadow cast by the trees, but then she realized it was something real, something alive, something hurt. Lying near a rusted fence post was a dog, its body curled tightly, motionless, except for the slow rise and fall of its chest. Its fur was matted with dirt, patches missing, and its ribs showed faintly beneath its sides. Emily approached slowly, each step heavy with concern. As she got closer, her heart sank. The dog's face was swollen with terrible growths, some raw and inflamed, making its features nearly unrecognizable. Its eyes, though cloudy and rimmed with discomfort, met hers with quiet desperation, filled not with fear, but with pain and confusion. It didn't growl. It didn't flinch. It didn't try to run. It simply stared at her, silently pleading, as if it knew it had no strength left. And as she knelt beside it, she saw tears beginning to well in its tired, gentle eyes. Without a second thought, Emily slipped off her jacket and carefully draped it over the trembling body of the dog. The fabric brushed against his thin frame, but he didn't resist, not even a flinch. His stillness wasn't trust, she feared, but exhaustion. Gently, she slid her arms beneath him, lifting him as one might cradle a newborn, slow, steady, aware of every fragile inch. He was heavier than he looked, but she held him tightly, whispering softly all the way to her car, parked just a short walk down the dirt road. She opened the door, eased him onto the back seat with the jacket still wrapped around him, and took a moment to steady her hands before turning the key in the ignition. The engine hummed to life. Emily glanced into the mirror, her eyes catching his barely open ones. "You're safe now," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Just hold on a little longer." Then she pressed her foot to the gas and headed for the animal clinic in Milltown, 20 long minutes away. At the clinic, the door swung open with urgency. 2 vet technicians rushed over and gently helped Emily lift the dog from the back seat. He didn't resist, but his body felt limp, his breathing shallow. Inside, the smell of antiseptic filled the air as they carried him into the exam room. A young veterinarian named Dr. Harris, calm but focused, stepped in and began his assessment. His hands moved carefully across the dog's body, eyes narrowing as he examined the swollen face and thin frame. The masses were tumors, large, hardened, and spreading, almost certainly the result of long-term neglect, poor living conditions, and exposure to the elements. His condition was critical. Time mattered. They administered sedation to ease his pain, then quickly began a series of scans and blood tests. The room buzzed with quiet urgency, machines beeping, whispered instructions, the soft clinking of metal tools. They were prepping him for emergency surgery, hoping they weren't too late. Meanwhile, Emily sat silently in the waiting room, fingers tightly clasped in her lap, her mind spinning. Her heart ached with the weight of worry. She didn't know this dog's story, but now she was part of it, and she wasn't going to walk away. After what felt like an eternity, the exam room door finally opened. Dr. Harris stepped out, his scrubs slightly wrinkled, his expression calm but worn from focus. Emily stood up immediately, bracing herself. The doctor offered a small, reassuring smile. "He made it through the surgery," he said gently. "We managed to remove the largest tumors around his face and neck. There are still others we'll need to monitor, but for now, he's stable. He's not out of the woods yet. But he has a real chance." Emily covered her mouth, a wave of relief and emotion crashing over her. Tears welled up in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She simply nodded, overwhelmed by the fragile hope those words carried. Dr. Harris hesitated for a second, then added, "He's going to need time. Recovery, quiet, care, a safe space to heal. Would you consider fostering him during this period? Just until we know more." Emily looked up, eyes still damp, but filled with resolve. There was no doubt in her voice. "Yes," she said softly, but firmly. "Yes, I will." Back home, Emily transformed a quiet corner of her living room into a place of comfort. She laid out soft blankets, placed a small heater nearby, and dimmed the lights to keep it peaceful. It wasn't much, but it felt warm, safe. She carefully lifted the dog from the car and set him down gently. His stitches were fresh, his body still trembling, but his eyes followed her every move. She knelt beside him with a syringe of liquid food, feeding him small amounts at a time. Between each careful drop, she whispered kind words, telling him he was safe now, that no one would hurt him again. After feeding, she cleaned his face with a damp cloth, her touch tender, patient. For hours she stayed nearby, reading softly or humming, letting him know he wasn't alone. Over the next few days, he began to improve. The trembling eased, his breathing steadied. He started to eat from a bowl, just a few bites at first, but enough to give her hope. On the 4th morning, as the sun streamed in through the window, she looked at him and said, "You showed up like a shadow, quiet and hurting, but still here." And just like that, the name stuck. She called him Shadow, from the way he had silently stepped into her life, and quietly claimed a piece of her heart. With each passing day, Shadow grew a little stronger. His steps became steadier, his eyes brighter. The fear that once clouded his gaze began to fade, replaced by a quiet trust. Emily started taking him on short walks down the lane, letting him sniff the breeze and feel the sun on his fur. In the evenings, she'd sit with him in her garden, reading softly as he lay curled beside her, head resting on her feet. People in town began to notice. The once reserved schoolteacher, known for her solitude, was now seen strolling with a dog at her side, her posture lighter, her expression gentler. Some waved, some stopped to ask questions. Emily would smile, brushing Shadow's ears, and simply say, "He found me." But it wasn't just about giving him a home. It was something deeper. The quiet they shared wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with meaning. Shadow's presence brought comfort, a sense of purpose. In caring for him, Emily found herself healing too. Two souls, once bruised and quiet, now finding peace together. The months slipped by quietly, marked by slow, healing days and quiet companionship. Shadow had come a long way. His fur had grown back in patches, his eyes sparkled with life, and he greeted the morning with gentle tail wags instead of shivers. He had learned to trust again, to rest without fear. The clinic had been searching for the right forever home, and one day they found it. A kind family in a nearby town with a large yard, gentle children, and experience with rescue dogs. It was everything he deserved. Emily smiled politely when they told her, nodding, even though something heavy tugged inside her. She knew this was the plan all along, to heal him, to help him move forward. But knowing didn't make it easier. On the morning of his departure, she rose early and made Shadow a soft breakfast. She brushed his coat, wrapped his favorite toy in a blanket, and sat with him on the porch one last time. When the car pulled into the driveway, she walked him slowly to the gate, her hand trembling slightly as it rested on his leash. She leaned down, kissed his head, and whispered, "Be good, be brave, and don't forget me." Shadow stepped into the car calmly, but just before the door closed, he turned back. Their eyes met, hers brimming with tears, his full of something unspoken. As the car drove away, Emily stood frozen on the path, hands clenched at her sides, fighting the ache in her chest. Life settled back into its quiet rhythm. The flowers in Emily's garden still opened with the morning sun, and the gravel path still crunched beneath her shoes during her daily walks. The air was just as fresh, the breeze just as soft. But something had changed. There was an absence that clung to the edges of her days. She often found herself pausing at the window, eyes drawn to the empty patch of rug where Shadow used to curl up. His steady breathing a silent comfort. Now, that space felt hollow. The house, though tidy and warm, seemed too still. Emily tried to convince herself that what she had done was enough, that saving him, giving him a second chance, was its own reward. But sometimes, late in the evening, she'd catch herself setting out 2 cups of tea instead of 1, or opening the door a moment too early, as if expecting him to be waiting on the step. And in those quiet, in-between moments, the silence didn't soothe her anymore. It lingered, heavier than before, wrapping itself around her like a memory she couldn't quite put down. 2 weeks later, the phone rang on a quiet afternoon. Emily answered with her usual calm voice, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. But on the other end was the clinic, their tone apologetic yet hopeful. The family who had adopted Shadow had faced an unexpected situation. They were moving across the country, and the new place didn't allow pets. They were heartbroken, but had no choice. The clinic hesitated, then asked gently, "Would you be willing to take him back?" For a moment, Emily didn't speak. Her heart, once heavy with his absence, now fluttered with something bright and warm. "Yes," she said, breath catching. "Yes, of course. Please bring him home." When the car pulled up that evening, Emily was already waiting by the gate, hands clenched with anticipation. The moment the door opened, Shadow bounded out, ears perked, eyes lit with joy. He ran straight to her without hesitation, throwing his weight into her arms. She laughed through tears, wrapping her arms around him as his tail thumped wildly against her legs. This time, there were no questions, no timelines, no goodbyes. Just one simple truth. He was home, where he had always belonged. Rachel, the vet tech, later thanked Emily for her heart. She simply smiled and replied, "I just did what felt right." Now, when people ask about her life, Emily shares the story of a broken dog who healed beside her. Because sometimes love finds us in the quietest, most unexpected ways. Dear friend, thank you for following Shadow's journey. If his story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching us.